Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice, and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Each episode is a conversation with inspiring people who make wonderful contributions to our knowledge in these areas and spark curiosity and ideas to pursue. Join me, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
The more you know what you stand for, the work you do, the value you create, and how, the easier it is for you to assess opportunities, because not all opportunities are opportunities you want. Not everyone else's flag is good, it lines up with your flag. And there's something really powerful in being able to have a humble and compassionate conversation with someone who is not right for you or who is not ready for the work you do.
Hi there, Innovator. It's really great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far, and I hope you enjoyed my recent conversations with podcaster Matt Johnson of Pursuing Results and with confidence coach and podcaster Christina Canters. I'm really excited today to have as my guest on the InnovaBuzz podcast, Kate Billing. Kate's the co-founder of Blacksmith, where she's on a mission to forge better, more human-focused leaders, working on new ways of developing leaders who are fit for the future. A quick promotional message from our sponsor, that's InnovaBuzz, where we help coaches and consultants build professional credibility, engage their target audience, and connect with their ideal client. That requires absolute clarity about who your ideal clients are and how you can help them. To help you get that clarity about your ideal client, take a look at our Marketing Master mini class, where in less than 30 minutes, you'll gain absolute clarity on your ideal client and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. Access the Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/Marketing Master. It's completely free and accessible without even giving away your email. In our discussion today, Kate talked to me about what is human-centered leadership and how we can take responsibility for our own map of the world. She explained why high performance is a bad metaphor for leadership and why high function and reaching high expectations are much better. And she explained that leadership begins with working on being your best self every day. Without further ado, then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Kate Billing. Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Auckland, New Zealand, just across the Tasman Sea from where I am, Kate Billing, who's the co-founder of Blacksmith, a boutique leadership development practice that uses fully human development approaches to evolve leadership at both a personal and a collective level. Welcome to the podcast, Kate. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thank you, Jürgen. Pleasure to be here.
Now, Mel Kettle, who was our guest on episode 231 of the InnovaBuzz podcast, suggested that we have a conversation with you, Kate. So big hello to Mel.
Yeah, hey, Mel.
Now, Kate, you believe it's time for a new kind of leader, and you call them human-centered leaders who together can create a world we need for our shared future, which sounds fabulous. That sort of certainly resonates with me. You talk about leaders who are examples of what's possible when we commit to the highest levels of humanity and responsibility in the ways that we live, lead, and do business. And your work at Blacksmith is focused on bringing about change that will help those leaders to develop and grow. So I'm really looking forward to exploring that topic in a lot more detail. I'm really passionate about keeping the human in marketing. So I guess, there's a lot of crossover there around the leadership aspect of that. But before we start talking about all things human leadership, give us a bit of a snapshot of your background and how you got to where you are today and what were some of the pivotal moments in that journey.
Right. Well, that's the rest of the podcast taken care of. for a start. But yeah, I suppose the potted version. Been building Blacksmith with my business partner and husband. We do life and business together. Paul Leacock. We've been doing that for nearly 11 years, and beyond that, I've been in the leadership, people, culture space for 24-ish, and I've been a human for 50. So the specialist, kind of more generalist in terms of people and culture, and then life experience, because I think lived experience from all areas of your life is a really important part of how we can lead and do business better. It's not just about academic leadership. So I include all three of those things when I think about my backstory. And I guess how I came to be doing exactly what I'm doing now is the usual twisty-turny route that most of the most interesting people I meet have taken in life. They set out with one plan and then had some either minor miracle, major cataclysm, or slight detour on a career path or in life that can lead them to a new place. And that's my story. I grew up wanting to be a doctor. At 10, I decided I wanted to be a doctor, and then that became very clearly about being a pathologist, which is traditionally known as the study of disease. For one reason and another, I didn't end up finishing that qualification. That is indeed another podcast. But the weird and wonderful thing is that my 10-year-old self was onto something, because I do, work in that space in terms of pathology and the study of disease, but more about what the etymology of the word's really about, which is the study of suffering. Because I think a lot of the way we experience life and talk about organisational experience, etc., is in the context of suffering and pain and hurt and stories and lack of safety and drama and all of these things about the experience of being human socially, and psychologically. And also now more and more with things like longevity, human longevity, which is one of my pet things coming in, how we live and look after ourselves in terms of our physical well-being, and all of those aspects are about play very strongly into the future of leadership and business as well. So my hard science background and love and curiosity for what's going on inside humans, my own life experience of, breaking down and getting lost in the long grass, have kind of led me to a place where I get to do the really, the incredible work I get to do with great people now.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I often say that when I'm asked that question about how did you get to where you are and what were some of the pivotal moments, I've kind of related the story a few times now, and listening back to me telling it, it kind of sounds like a really straight line path, but it's exactly what you say. It's a kind of off to the left, and that plan, I don't like that plan anymore, so let's turn right and let's go up and let's go down, and it's all over the place.
Yeah, I in my work I talk about the concept of map versus landscape. And there's the map that we think we have either personally or in business, and then there's the landscape, which is the ever-changing context, and which includes who we are and how the world is and how other people are. And if the map and the landscape don't agree, then the landscape's the right one and the map's wrong. So it's a chance to constantly be redrawing maps.
Yeah, and of course we see the landscape not as it is, but as we are, right?
Totally.
Because I was going to jump onto something you said a moment ago, and to me that sounds like it's leadership begins with yourself. So you talked about self-care in the context of everybody living longer because of the advances in modern medicine and whatnot, and also, I guess, nutrition and just the way we live our lives. Everything is such that, as a rule, humans are living longer. So looking after yourself so that longer life is actually a quality one is really important. So what, in terms of high performance leadership, well, what do you see as the things that you need to be starting with in terms of self leadership?
Yeah, couple of things in there. At the moment I have a personal kind of bone I'm gnawing on about this idea of high performance. I would love to see the conversation change from high performance, which I think speaks to stars and to this Olympic class. You know, there's often a sports metaphor in Australia and New Zealand involved with this kind of conversation, which is, I think we can do better and think more broadly. But what I'm more curious about is this combination of high function, high expectation, and then just performance. Like what would happen if every individual, team, and organisation was in a healthy, high functioning state? What would happen if there were high, not unreachable, but high, stretchy, explicit expectations that people were supported and developed to meet? And then what if everyone just had to perform to that level? There are no stars. There's no high performance. Everybody plays their part. And this is in part something I've been reflecting on for a very long time, because I think the conversation of stars and high performance is unhelpful when it comes to overall organisational performance, team performance, and even an individual. If I'm not a high performance and I'm not a star, what am I? Because we tend to be a little black and white about this. So it's been long reflections on that, but also a great book, which escapes me at the moment, but by Captain Chris Hadfield, who was on the International Space Station. He led the International Space Station for it was 167 days. And he talks about zero, aiming for zero and being a 0 + 1 or -1, which I encourage people to explore and to reflect on, about whether if we just all aimed for zero, and zero is actually not like, it's not a shitty performance, it's a high expectation and a high functioning level of you playing your role in all the ways you need to. If everyone did that in your team or your business or your family or your PTA group or your rugby team, what would happen?
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept, isn't it? I think, to me, you're actually the first person that's expressed it that way to me. So it raises a whole lot of thoughts. But to me, I take the philosophy of, I want to be the best I can be. And this, I hadn't never thought of that high performance and the sports analogy in those terms. I sort of thought, okay, my high performance is the best I can be. But you're right. If you take it as a sports analogy, usually there's a winner and loser in sports. And so that's not what this is about, right? And so if you're not the winner, that means you're the loser. You're one of the losers, right?
Yeah,
We've just had the Australian Open tennis here, and there's, I don't know how many 100 players start the tournament, and it's basically a knockout all the way through to the final, and there's one winner at the end, and so the other 99, if there's 100, are losers basically. Even the guy that got into the final but didn't win the final, who presumably performed at a really high level to reach where he got to, but still is a loser.
Yeah, and in New Zealand we have something that my father has always called the Great New Zealand Knocking Machine, which is the minute you're not winning, like we love an underdog, but the minute one of our esteemed, particularly something like the All Blacks or whatever, are not winning, well then they're dead to us and they're on the front page and they're in the talk back and they're everything else, and what's wrong with them? And it's like,
it's a crisis.
They are one of the world's leading teams. They just weren't the best team on the day, and that's okay. But so I think there's this, there's a movie called Talladega Nights, a Will Ferrell movie, The Legend of Ricky Bobby. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but in that, one of the things that keeps the lead character, Ricky Bobby, striving and being completely unreasonable and weird in terms of always winning on the track. He's that's a race called the Talladega 500, is that his father said to him, if you're not first, you're last. And I think there is a bit of a mindset around that, and there is a sense of there's a difference between this like striving, grasping kind of, there's certain energy and tension and levels of identity that sit behind different definitions and expressions of high performance. There's kind of that anxious, grasping, striving energy. And then there's this calm, grounded, do the work. It's a really long game. And this comes back to the long life. And I think the first one is perpetuated often by our 3/4 blind approach to business, last quarter, this quarter, next quarter.
Mhm.
And this just constant, the anxiety and energy that's created by back-to-back meetings, living out of inboxes, etc., versus creating the space to really go deeper in our reflections on who we are, how we're being, how we can function together, and what we're going after. Because what we're after is to go better when the obsession seems to be faster. So redefining even what performance means, let alone high performance, in the current construct is an important conversation, because I think we're playing by old rules. We're using a map that's no longer relevant, and we try to go faster following old roads that no longer exist. We're going to get in a hell of a mess.
All right. Well, one of the things, I mean, you say fully human development approaches to evolve leadership. So talk to us a little bit about how do you see the characteristics of human-centered leadership, and what are those human development approaches?
Yeah, so the minute you start to put things like human and leadership into a sentence, the scope of the conversation becomes enormous. When it comes to the fully human thing, there are a number of layers to it. For us, one of those layers is about whole person development. The edges of the organisational construct or the work paradigm have changed a lot. There is no 9 to 5. There is no one place that you go to work with one set of tools you use to do the job, at least not for the organisations we work with, which are mainly kind of knowledge, service, creative in some combination, be they a large government department or a bank or a company that's in R&D in the agriculture sector or insurance or a media company. They're all they depend on this. What's going on in people's heads and what they do with their hands individually and collectively. So there are no kind of edges around us. So our part of it from a whole person development perspective is to say to people, don't just think about your work context in terms of relationships, experiences, and opportunities to apply this learning. Go where the live fire is. So if the live fire around feedback or conflict or bold conversations is something to do with home, teenage children, partner, parent who might need to move out of independent living into more supported living, get a hearing aid, do whatever the things might be. Go use it there if you feel like that's where the opportunity is. Don't look around your work environment and say, me and my team are great, so I don't have to practice. And I think this practice piece comes into another aspect of the fully human piece. It's saying that, traditionally, I think, even when I say traditionally, I mean, and still today, in most minds of leaders and many minds of the people who are responsible for creating development for leaders, it is still about tools, still about putting more stuff in the toolkit. It's about fresh content. Oh, no, we've seen that one. It's about more kind of set conceptual and academic frameworks and things that, have Harvard or Stanford attached to them. All of those things are great. However, if they are not contextualized within psychological and social dynamics within individuals and relationships and groups, and they're not put into the reality of people's current experience, they're not drawing on past experience to think about situations that were different, could have been different with the use of them, and they're not being supported by a system, because the human behaviour is tricky, because it starts with a mindset shift, and our ways of being and doing individually and as an organisation hold us really tightly in the way we do things right now. So you have to create a system based on the understanding that humans, transforming, educating humans, learning experience for humans, particularly adults who've been out of the habit for a while. And, my age, I'm a proud Gen Xer. My experience of school was nothing like what, kids are experiencing now. It was a turn up, know the answers, do well in your exam, off you go, sunshine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And there's still that kind of approach to development now versus saying, this is tricky. Here's a piece of something new. I don't care if you've seen it before. Tell me what you know about it. What are you doing with it? What's your understanding of it? Where have you tried to use it and it's gone really badly? What about something where you've experienced growth and change? You've got to take things from people from things they know and things they do to who they are. That's our ultimate goal, is moving up that identity level, because when people see themselves as different, they are different. So the fully human piece comes down to contextual understanding, the way we design the experiences and the system of development, understanding how humans work individually and collectively, and then even looking at the content and construct. Things like saying soft skills and hard skills, which is the way people often talk about. There's a binary nature, a duality around what we're trying to develop in people that's just no longer useful. So we talk about strong skills, which is a crossover space of where those things come together. And in fact, some new things that are in that space, and just trying to change the language around it so people don't go, oh, that soft and fluffy stuff. It's like, that soft and fluffy stuff is the hardest stuff you will ever do in your life.
Exactly,
So, yeah,
But
so that's a bit about all of that anyway.
yeah, but even with that language, I mean, you make a really interesting point around the language, and some of that language actually defines what it is. So people say, okay, the hard skills, I mean, that's relates to, I guess, tactical stuff, functional knowledge of the tasks at hand. But on the other hand, it could say, well, that's really hard. Whereas, as in difficult, whereas what's usually a lot more difficult, because that's easy to learn, is the so-called soft skills, because I don't recall at any time in my school life that anything related to those so-called soft skills was taught, or that there was ever really much conversation around it. It was kind of something that you either absorbed through your interactions with other people, or you didn't, and a lot of people didn't, which is a real problem.
Well, and when you look at that and the reading, writing, arithmetic thing, it was all about, and even the conversations were about, what job are you going to get? It was all geared around entering an industrial sort of corporatized workforce, dependent on your age, and being employable as opposed to being a learner. So it was those skills. And I think the way a lot of leadership development is done now, is still follows that train, of capability and what skills and what can you do when, if we turn our attention to how rapidly the world is changing, the exponential nature of that change, like radical step changes that are going to be happening over the next, you listen to any number of futurists on this topic, and it seems to be they're all saying between the next 10 and the next 30 years is the most pivotal time in human history for a whole lot of reasons. And we're going to experience the most change thanks to population growth, technology, the impact of that on longevity, on power, on where we live, what we do, how we do it, how we feed ourselves, how we move ourselves around, how we house ourselves. And I think we can't quite get our heads around how big that's going to be. And the individual and collective adaptability, like our ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, to deal with change. It's not change management anymore, taking this hard skill thing of you do a Gantt chart and you do X, Y, and Z. It's like, that's not what change leadership's about anymore. So, what got us here won't get us where we're going.
Yes, I think that was a kind of paraphrase of something that Einstein said probably 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So in terms of leadership, and you talked about all these changes happening, and we need to take a different approach, certainly modify our approach some way. I mean, I don't want to get into politics too much, but there's been some really bad examples of lack of leadership, I would describe it as, here in Australia recently, around the bushfire crisis that we've experienced. But I guess, in politics, in some ways, they're the people that are setting some direction for the population. But on the other hand, it's everybody's personal responsibility to take leadership for their own sphere of influence. And I wonder, is one a reflection of the other, or is it a metaphor? I don't know. I'm kind of
I don't know.
confused about what's the impact of kind of the political leaders that are around, and often not doing the things that certainly that I think they should be doing, and I'm sure that a lot of other people see gaps there. But on the other hand, what responsibility do we have to influence that? Certainly in democracies, we have opportunities at elections, but um, that only works if there's a large number decide that one lot have to go and another lot have to come in.
Yeah, man, this is a big topic because there are lots of dimensions to it. First of all, the system of politics and the way that works, and then the humanity of the individuals involved in all of it, whether it's the voters. So you talk about a large number of people having to decide one lot's in or not. One of the other questions is the large population, and I know it's the same in New Zealand, of people who don't even go and vote. And that's happening with younger and younger voters saying, well, what's the point? Kind of, in lots of ways, we're living in a post-democratic era. So the question of whether democracy is, and I know it's a provocative thing to say, but it's the question of whether democracy is working and whether, in fact, it can work any longer in the world as it is, a la Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, Trump, Brexit, all of these things. If the system is not, the world is no longer the world in which the democratic idea arose in. So can it still function in that environment? Humans are the way humans are, and, the current system is a popularity contest which can be influenced. And so
that's right.
if you're a career politician, then you have an interest in remaining in office and you'll do what you can. So some of the big plays, and whether this is local or central government, some of the big plays that are required, you won't make because you won't get elected if you did what really needed to be done.
Yep,
and within a few years, what you've put your career on the line for would be overturned by somebody else anyway. So Yuval Noah Harari, who is an incredible thinker in this space, he was at Davos recently, but he has written a number of books on this and spoken widely about the nature of the major systemic challenges we have as humans on the planet and the need for a different way of governing globally to deal with these things, and of connecting even regional governments, when we have people pulling back into, that more local sovereignty idea, which is happening as we get more and more people on the planet. It's like, how do we climate change? There are the layers at which, say, we can do something about it, whether it's, no matter what your belief is about how it happens to be coming about, the climate has been changing since well before humans were here. There's no doubt it's changing at the moment. So yes, there are things you and I can do. We can make personal leadership decisions about how we live our life. Again, a provocative thing, but the research is there to say the number one thing people can do from a personal leadership perspective, if they want to impact the climate, is have one less child. But that's a thorny topic. How do you get into a conversation?
It is a thorny topic, yeah.
That's a thorny topic, but that is.
And how do you implement that in the democracy? Because, they did it in China, and it was in place for pretty much a whole generation, but it was very much a dictatorship, and it was pretty horrendous how they implemented that. And then now
that was slightly
they've
different.
got other problems as a result.
That's slightly different, and that was a one-child policy, and that's certainly not what's being talked about. It's just having one less. If you're going to have three, have two. And it's something not to tell people to do it, because it's not my business. But it's like, if people are really interested in making a difference, then educate yourself about what you can do to make a difference. Because having reusable veggie bags and supermarket shopping bags is one thing, but if you really want to make a difference, having one less child apparently is 25 times more impactful than the second thing that any individual can do, and that is have an electric vehicle. So if people really care about this, it's like find out, yes, the little things we can do, but some of the big things that can be done, whether it's by an individual or it's by a local government, a national government, or a global government, are big and they require some sacrifice, and they're going to be a little painful if we really want to change stuff. So this getting off the climate change sort of thing, because that's just one aspect of what we've got going on as humans. And I think it's really easy to get into a dystopian, doom and gloom, the world is ending mindset about this, when, again, great book called Factfulness, if anyone's finding themselves in the hopper about how shitty it is at the moment. It's the best time to be alive in human history. But we're not looking at what makes life for humans in particular, what makes life on the planet great. There are fewer people living in poverty than ever before. You know, women's rights and presence and equality is the best it's, been for an incredibly long time. We are finding innovative ways to feed ourselves, which hopefully means we're going to be doing less harm to animals on the planet. There's all sorts of really, really, really good stuff going on. But this is, again, this aspect of our humanness. We always look at what's wrong and we go to the dark side. We go below the line.
Yeah. Well, some of it, I mean, you pointed out quite a few things there that certainly have changed for the better over the years. But some of I think one of the consequences is that, particularly in this day and age of technology, is that we're shining the spotlight a lot more now on where progress perhaps hasn't come in a way that we're expecting today.
Yeah.
So the spotlight will shine on, well, here's some people that are still living in poverty and are still starving, or whatever's going on for them, or there's slavery, or there's war, or there's horrendous things happening to people. So we're shining the spotlight on those things because it's now less the norm that people are living like that, and we're saying there's no need for this to be happening today. And so that's where I think perhaps some of the negativity comes from. But it comes back to another thing you mentioned earlier, which is around the idea of democracy and the influence of media, and by media I mean what's available to all of us today in this day and age. So we can get on Facebook and make some claim. It's unsubstantiated. It can even be racist, bigotry, homophobic, or whatever, and it doesn't get taken down. It may eventually get taken down, but before it gets taken down, it's been seen and perhaps had an impact on millions of people.
Yeah. And this is this uber connectedness and the transparency, and we're just the platform, we're not the publisher. Conversation, which is a massive rabbit hole we won't go down. But it does mean, when you look at things like anxiety, if you're a parent and you certainly look around at the data that's coming out from school-age children about the rising levels of anxiety and things like climate grief, and which is a real thing, they have a dystopian reality, because all of this stuff is, the teenage mind is weird and wonderful little thing as it's rewiring itself and being flooded with hormones and having all of these drives switched on that it doesn't understand. And part of the drive is to go out into the world. And when they look at the world, to leave their family, go out into the world, find others, and getting right back to the old brain now. The world, if you believe everything that you see in your TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever feeds, and the group texts on WhatsApp that kids have going and sharing stuff, it's pretty grim, So this is one of the things, I say I'm a conscious capitalist. So it's about, I think business actually, and the way businesses can play their part in changing the world. Blacksmith is a certified B Corp, and a big shout out particularly to B Lab and the Melbourne B Corp crew, because that's the real centre for activity in Australia around this. And there's great stuff happening all over New Zealand, but especially down in Christchurch. Growing community here in Auckland. And we're all businesses that kind of look at business as a force for good and saying, well, we employ people, we educate them, we do business with people, we have presence in markets. Through all of those things, supply chain, how we develop our people, who our customers are, how we educate them, how we make our products, what we do with our profits, how we are as people, is material to helping accelerate the change in consciousness and the practice on the planet, because all of these things are happening and it's part of a reality. So just looking to government isn't the answer. And we can do so much ourselves at an individual level, but if we start to use business and the mechanism of our organisations and, the power of positive free markets and production and collaboration and everything else, I think we can create, elevate that consciousness and shift the capability and create more connection and collaboration so that we can make a difference faster. And that's really, I think that's the big leadership opportunity for people in business now. Is it's not just about money and it's not just about purpose washing and putting a nice campaign front on it. It's how can you really be different in yourself and your people, positively impact and work in partnership with your clients and customers and suppliers, and have a positive impact.
Yeah, well, we've talked quite a bit about politics and the general state of affairs in the world, but
Which was something I never like to do usually, so you caught me napping.
I think you've raised a really good point there, and I think that this is probably more relevant to the general topic of this podcast, and that's around the role of business in, providing that human-centered leadership. And so one of the things I see there is, we do business with people, as you say, and so we can have impact on people there, and we can be models. So we can be models for our customers, we can be models for our suppliers, and we can be models for other businesses as well as, as individuals for our fellow employees. So I think that's a really good point. So tell us a little bit more then, like you talk about being a humanist as a leader in business. So what does that mean to you?
Well, humanism is a school of philosophy, a reasonably modern one as far as philosophy goes. And philosophy is one of the things I think it would be great for people, leaders in particular, but anybody to get back to reading more of. Because it is about, dependent on the school of philosophy, the fundamental dilemmas of the experience of being human, whether it's morality or existentialism or stoicism. I like Stoic philosophy. That's kind of expect the best but prepare for the worst is the kind of way of putting that. And this humanism is basically the idea that we've got this. We're not going to abdicate whether there is a God or not, and that's everyone's personal belief and faith system. Basically, we're here getting on with our thing, and we have the opportunity and responsibility, and this is where you mentioned before about people rising to and living by the highest levels of humanity and responsibility. We are the makers of our own destiny. We are the solvers of our own problems. We are the creators of those problems, and there's no get out of jail and wait for some superhero to come and save us. So humanism is about the belief that we have in us the capacity to find our way through this together, to solve the problems that we are unconsciously and consciously making, and to work together to create a better world, really. That's what humanism is. Like, we've got this, so let's do it.
And how would you kind of apply that in a business sense, or teach people or promote it?
Yeah, so there are different aspects to it. So the first dimension is kind of around compassion and kindness and empathy, this idea of everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. Just like me, you have experienced suffering in your life. Just like me, you're trying to work out best way to deal with the suffering and the opportunities that you have at the moment. There's this whole human connectedness and the commonality of human experience. That's an important aspect of it. Another aspect of it is the idea of human agency, is that we have without getting into a debate about free will, we have a degree of agency over and choice whether we walk, take the bus, or drive our car, whether we choose to set aside a provocative comment that somebody has made and not pursue a conflict because it wouldn't serve positively in that moment. You know, there's kind of these different aspects of human agency and independence. And I think often in organisations, we abdicate agency in favour of the power dynamic, which says you're the boss, it's your problem, it's your fault, it's your responsibility, versus I can't do anything about it. So, you know, that's another aspect of it. Another dimension of it is about systems and strategic thinking. So that's an aspect of humanism applied in a leadership environment, is to think from a human perspective, what is the context and what is the capacity we have, what are the problems to solve, and how do we best go about it. So yeah, there are different aspects to it, but it is always coming back to even the way I think now some people are thinking about digital transformation. They think the technology is going to do it for them. Technology, I had Kelly Windle, who is a friend and colleague of mine, in a podcast with Mel Kettle, actually, was talking about, you know, people think technology is the disruptive agent. It's not. Technology is just table stakes. Everyone's going to have all of the technology soon, and it's getting cheaper. The truly disruptive piece is the human adaptation aspect around it. So how do humans work with it? How do we work out to use it better? How do the technology at the moment is not developing itself. That'll come with super AI, but at the moment, humans are directing the development of the technology, and in particular AI. So there's this human aspect to it that goes beyond how do we train the people to use it, and can, you know, they use the new apps to actually that being the powerhouse for the disruptive advantage, rather than technology.
Yeah, well, I certainly believe that technology, whether it's used, technology is used across the board. We all use technology these days. But as you say, some people are kind of abdicating to technology and saying, well, technology can handle that. And it's sort of like the superhero that you mentioned a little while ago that we're all waiting for. It's not that. I kind of see technology as something that helps each of us as individuals perhaps free up more time so that we can engage in more human relationships. And then, it's those human relationships where we can actually make things happen, working with other people and kind of leading change, if you like.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. From a leadership perspective, the big challenges aren't necessarily, and this is some of Ronald Heifetz's work out of Harvard, but they're not this big systemic challenges, the thorny stuff we're working with in organisations and communities and society, and they're not what's called technical challenges, where we can apply what we know and things that have worked in the past, etc., to solve them. Technical problems, there, work on that project, done. They're more adaptive, and they are painful and messy and tricky, and they ask new and different things of us. And our humanity, our humanness, and our ability to work with understand and see the shadow side, and work with the positive side, and how to partner with technology in that space to solve our problems, is really the pointy end of where leadership is going. You know, how do we be better together when these problems are large, complex, and take a long time to solve? And even if technology is part of the solution, it is literally a tool. But we've got to work out how to be with it while we work out how to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we kind of continue solving all the problems of the world and talking about human leadership, I think it's a good point to move on, bearing in mind the time, and want to be respectful of your time. So I think it's time to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round that we ask each of our guests, and it's designed to help our audience, who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field, with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions to ask, and hopefully you'll give us some really insightful answers that'll inspire the listener to go and do something awesome today.
Okay.
So what's the number one thing you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Create space is my big thing, this further to an earlier part of our conversation about this, the speed at which we're all moving and trying to operate, and this cult of busyness. Innovating in the cracks is really hard. Creating the space for thinking, creating the space for reflecting and looking at what is happening with a product, a market, an opportunity, a service, to say, how could this be better, or what am I missing, or where's the new opportunity? There may be those moments of inspiration that come to you, but then you've still got to create the space to sit back, look at it and go, okay, so what? And what could we try? And if we're trying something, innovation is iterative. It's not a one-hit wonder. So we've got to be creating the space to sit back, widen out and look at the impact and what's working and everything else. So I think creating space generally in our lives and business is something that there's an opportunity for more focus on.
Okay, so that would be time and physical space.
And headspace. Like
and
freeing
headspace,
up your mind of busy thoughts.
Free of distractions, yeah. Great.
Yes.
All right, well, great advice, yeah. So moving on then, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
In our world, it is about deeply understanding humans and the opportunities and challenges of business and organisational context. So it is absolutely about that, creating space. It is reflecting on my own experience. It is reflecting on the conversations that we have in both the development programs and with clients, which are rich with insight and opportunity. And I have strategy as my number one Gallup strength. So I'm forever looking across all of that stuff for patterns and, themes and connections. So it's really it is creating the space for that, and then taking risks. Just be prepared to get something out of the garage, but half build it, get it out, take it for a test drive, get some feedback, go do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love the test and get feedback. A lot of the thing that always amuses me, and I'm guilty of this just as much as most people, I guess, is, you see something that often grabs your attention because it's highly successful, and you say, oh, I thought of that 10 years ago. But the thing is, the people that actually made it took action.
Yeah. And if you see, you can test your idea. I'm a great believer in test at concept level. So go out and talk with people you think, might be interested in what you've got to offer, and say, I've been noticing, I've been thinking, this has been coming up a lot. What I'm wondering is, whether something like this, test the concept level. And then when you find some people who are curious or interested, go, well, if I made something like that, would you like, would that be something you'd like? Would you have a test drive for me, kind of thing? Like, would you be part of a workshop or an event or a conversation? Can I come and run it by you to test drive it? People love that. They love being included in it. But yeah, beware the focus group though. Most people don't know what they need, and they're afraid of anything that's too new.
Yeah.
So just be mindful.
Yeah, I love the test drive stuff, and I'd love to jump on that. And you're right. I always get a big buzz. I had one the other day where somebody was doing something, and I said, "Oh, would this work with?" It was like they were implementing something in one software platform, and I said, "Would this work in another software platform, which happens to be one I really like using?" And they came back and they said, "Well, we might put that on the list next once we finish this one, and would you be willing to be a beta tester for that?" So I thought, oh, well, that was, I'd love to do that. Yeah, love to get involved. You're right. People do love to sort of help out and be included and have their voices heard, I guess, is the other part of it. Yeah.
Totally.
Well, on the subject of tools, is there a tool or a resource that you use most often, something that's favourite?
Yeah, so I've got one behind me, right, which I'm showing Jürgen. I'm showing Jürgen, but nobody else can see the video. And that is a whiteboard and Post-it notes. I have them all over the place. So I have 3 in my house, which may seem excessive. But I'm a great fan of appropriate excessiveness. So I would say that, and also I'm a big fan of longhand note writing. So I carry a journal with me all the time, which has plain and lined pages in it so that I can draw pictures, draw models, write stuff out. Yeah, and longhand writing is great. I mean, it's, there's the wonders of modern technology, but then there's how your brain works. And writing stuff out and being able to move it around and use different colours really appeals to my brain. So that works for me.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I've got to say that a whiteboard, I've got 3 of them there to my left.
Yeah.
You can't see them at the moment, but I love the whiteboards and the post-it notes. I think I've got half of them covered in post-it notes. And whilst I'm quite a techno freak and I love getting things digital as much as I can, I still haven't found a way to do the old whiteboard and the post-it notes digitally.
It's just not the same.
That I like. Yeah, exactly. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a project or a client on track?
Lots of conversations. I think is have a really clear expectation conversation and kind of role clarity piece, like who's doing what when, and talk more often than you think you need to. And I mean, all of that is about building connection and trust through the conversations. Yeah, I think that's the big thing for me, because what on track means, certainly in the nature of the work we're doing, because it's context-based learning all the time, context is changing further to our map and landscape. So we might have a map, and then it's like, whoops, on track is no longer on track, actually, because it'll be on track in the map, but not on track in the real world because you're being acquired by somebody or you've got a new CEO coming on. So actually we've got to change stuff up. So that constantly being connected and talking and making sure that, I hate surprises. Everything's getting raised as soon as people know it and that kind of thing.
All right. Yeah, that's great advice. I think, a lot of people have answered that question with good communication, but I think you've sort of highlighted it at a much deeper level there, and having those conversations all the time. And that is human leadership, I think.
Yeah.
So what's the number one thing you think anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Stand for something. And, I think it's stand for something and not purpose in a wishy-washy trying to, virtue signal kind of way, like purpose in a really deep, I give way. I don't know if swearing's okay, but sorry, I do. And be prepared to fly your freak flag. Like stand for it and don't keep it a secret. Make your own flag, paint it, put glitter on it, applique, whatever, pirate flag, run it up the flagpole and be prepared to be visible and seen for that, and to be a little bit provocative but also to be open. So being provocative and standing for something doesn't mean being immovable and inflexible. You still have to come to all of the conversations from a place of curiosity, and that makes you more accessible. So I think standing out and being different in today's day and age is really centered on that. If you put your freak flag up and say, here's what I believe and here's what I'm doing about it, come play with me, which is the way I tend to work. Other people will go, oh yeah, no, that's not my flag.
Yeah.
Or, but what I find is more people go, where have you been all my life? Oh, I believe that too, but I didn't feel safe to say it,
That's right, yeah.
So that's what I reckon. That's my advice.
Yeah, and also you'll find that, and some people say that's not my flag, and that's perfectly okay. And they'll say, well, we're not going to work with you, which is fine. But as you say, then there'll be others that say, oh, gee, where were you 10 years ago when I really needed you? And, let's catch up.
But and further to your other people deciding they might not work with you because of your flag, the more you know what you stand for, the work you do, the value you create and how, the easier it is for you to assess opportunities, because not all opportunities are opportunities you want. Not everyone else's flag is good. It lines up with your flag. And
Yeah.
there's something really powerful in being able to have a humble and compassionate conversation with someone who is not right for you or who is not ready for the work you do. And I talk about things being, the rightness and readiness scale. The more you know yourself, the more you know how you're different, the more you know how you create value and who you create that value best with, the better able you are to decide whether someone is right or ready. So there's a rightness scale and a readiness scale, and everyone has their own definition of what that means. And for me, if people are in the top right-hand corner, that's a hell yes. That's a, oh my God, this is so right, so ready, can we start now?
Yeah.
And everyone feels it in the conversations. If they're really ready, but actually what they have is they have needs that you can't meet, or there's some other aspect of it that means it's not the right fit, then you can say, look, we're not for you, but I'd love to connect you with someone else in my network who I think would be a really great fit based on this, this, and this. If they're really right, but they're not really ready, you can say not yet and have a conversation about why and how that organisation or individual might get ready. And there's huge power in that conversation, because people are like, nobody says not yet or no. Everyone wants their business. What the hell?
Yeah.
But they're like, no, actually, you've got a point. And you're doing right by the client, not just chasing the money. And then they're not right and they're not ready, and that's a hard pass. And that's, again, compassionate and humble conversation, but with feedback for them. I think too many people are hungry for business and take the wrong stuff because they don't know what they want and they don't know what they stand for. And too many clients think that everyone wants them because they've got money.
Yeah. Well, I think you've kind of encapsulated my philosophy on marketing there really well, and it's certainly it's a bit unfortunate that that's something that differentiates people in business from the majority, but that's the case. And I think part of ethical leadership to me is having that philosophy.
Yeah, respect the humans involved, including yourself.
Yeah, doing right by the people may not be saying, I'll take your business. It may be saying, well, you're not ready yet, or you'd be better served going to these people, or I'm sorry, this just isn't gonna work.
Yeah. Not an easy conversation necessarily, but
No.
the right one.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Kate. This has been absolutely fascinating. So where can people reach out and find out more about you and about Blacksmith, and also perhaps even reach out and say thank you for what you've shared with us today and continue a conversation if you want?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to connect with me is via LinkedIn, and I'm just Kate Billing. Look me up. And then Blacksmith, if you're curious, the website is www.blacksmith.co.nz, and over the next few months that's going to be getting a little bit of a rewrite as we reframe. It's 4 years old. That's a long time in the web world. It's going to be getting a little reframe, but you can sign up to be part of our Fully Human tribe there by signing up for the newsletter, and people can find out about more of my thinking and events if they're in New Zealand. So always glad to collect other like-minded souls along the way.
Great. Well, we'll have the links for you in the show notes for that, so people can click through and just connect. All right. Now, what big piece of advice would you like to leave our listener in regard to being a leader in innovation and in their field?
And I think it's a Jim Rohn quote, but it's work harder on yourself than you do the job. It's simple, but it's like it comes back to your self-leadership piece. The best innovation, the best work, the deepest connections, the most powerful impact comes from you being your best self. And that is a better everyday job, not a one and done. So reflect each day. At the end of the day, was I better today than I was yesterday? And if not, never have 2 no's 2 days in a row.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love the quote, and I think being your best self every day is really good, and I love the reflection bit too. All right. Well, finally, Kate, who would you like me to have a chat with on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
Well, the person that I was reflecting on this, and I reckon Andrew Davies, who's the CEO of B-Lab, Australia and New Zealand. Andrew's based in Melbourne, and he heads up B-Lab, who are responsible for the B Corp impact assessment and getting certified B Corps, which is all about, better business for a better world. If you liked some of the things we talked about today and the opportunity of, business and leadership to play a stronger part in shaping our future, then I think Andrew would have some really cool perspectives, both from an Australian and New Zealand context, but bringing in the global perspective as well.
Great. Well, we'll get an introduction from you to Andrew, and we'll see if we can get him on the InnovaBuzz podcast for a conversation.
Will do.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your time with us today and your insights and your thoughts on leadership, human leadership, and what that means we kind of went down the path of politics a little bit and general, but
a few rabbit holes, but that's okay.
Yeah,
the listeners will forgive us.
Yeah, we did come back to business, and I think there were lots of great tips there. And even the conversation around politics, I think, had lots of stories and metaphors that can be applied to self-leadership and also to, business context. So I'm hoping that there's value right across the board there. So thanks again. I've really enjoyed this. I could have gone on for ages and also learnt quite a bit. So I wish you all the best for the future, and let's keep in touch. Let's continue the conversation.
Thanks, Jürgen.
I hope you enjoyed that thought-provoking and all-ranging conversation with Kate and took something away from the conversation we had with her today. I really like Kate's take on the high-performance sporting metaphor and how it might be better in a leadership context to use other terms like high function and reaching high expectations, because neither of those two terms involve winners and losers. I'd love to know what you took away from Kate's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Kate Billing. That is KateBilling. All lowercase, or one word, innovabiz.co/Kate Billing. At that URL, you'll find contact information for getting in touch with Kate, as well as links to the Blacksmith website, to her social media pages, and the other resources that we spoke about in our conversation today. Kate suggested that we have a conversation with Andrew Davies of B Corporation on a future InnovaBuzz podcast episode. So, Andrew, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Kate Billing. Remember to check out our Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/Marketing Master. It's completely free and accessible without even giving away your email. But most importantly, it will enable you in less than 30 minutes to gain absolute clarity about who your ideal client is and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. And if you'd like our help to go even deeper into marketing mastery, or our help with producing your very own podcast, even launching your very own podcast if you don't yet have one, then send me an email to jurgen@innovabiz.co and we can set up a quick call to have a short conversation and find out whether we're a good fit for one another. Tune in again to the next episodes of the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we've got more fantastic guests lined up, including Iman Zabi of the Scribesmith and Dr. Gleb Sapursky, disaster avoidance expert. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the InnovaBuzz podcast at innovabuzz.com/subscribe. innovabuzz.com/subscribe. Make sure you never miss another episode. It would also mean a lot to me if you leave us a review, because what you think matters. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions, or questions you have, so go ahead and share them in the comments below the blog post for this episode. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.